So we are continuing with David's women. We've seen his first wife, Michal, Saul's daughter. We've seen Abigail, how she saved the life of her husband and the men. And today we're looking at Bathsheba. Now the Bible says it was the time, the days when kings used to go out to battle with their men. So the kings would go out with his men and lead the battle, and his presence alone during the war, during the battle, will boost the morale of his men. It serves as an encouragement. But for some reason, only God knows why, David did not go out to battle. He sent his man Joab with his men and the soldiers, the army, and they went forth to go and fight this battle with the Ammonites. But David stayed behind in Jerusalem. He did not go. You see what happens? Sometimes you're supposed to be in church, you stay at home for one reason or the other. An ex-girlfriend, an ex-boyfriend comes to visit at that particular time. You end up in sexual sin with them. But if you'd been in church when they came to visit, they would have missed you. You would have been saved. But you know, that day you chose not to go, not because you were sick, not because you were tired. You just chose that I'm not going today, and you know, that happened. So David stayed behind in Jerusalem. He did not go out to war with his men, and he was on top of the roof walking aimlessly about, and he saw a woman bathing in her garden, in her backyard, in her bathroom, in her home. Because I've heard lots of people blame Bathsheba. Why should she be bathing there? Why should she do this? She was in her home, in her own home. That's what the Bible said. And because David was high up, she probably thought David had gone to war with the men he was supposed to as the king. I do not know. But she was taking her bath, harmless, innocent bath. And David on the roof looked down and saw a woman bathing. He did not close his eyes and quickly go back in. He stayed and he watched. And then he sent one of his men to inquire about her. Who is she? The man said, that's Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite's wife. He told them to go and fetch her and bring her. He's the king. So she goes to go and see David, probably scared, probably wondering, why does he want to see me? I'm pretty sure she didn't think, yes, he fancies me. You know, I'm going to the king. I'm pretty sure she didn't think that. She must have been really apprehensive. Why does the king want to see me? Has something happened to my husband? He's at war. So she goes in to see the king. One thing leads to another. He sleeps with her. Maybe back in those days, a woman can't say no to the king. I mean, it happens in some cultures, even now, in some societies, where a woman, even if she's married, cannot say no to a king. When a king sees a woman, there's some places now, I won't mention the names, when a king sees a woman, even if she's with her husband, he will tell the man, sorry, she's now my wife. The man he can't say nothing. She becomes the king's, God knows how many wife, and she starts living there in the palace against her will, against her wishes, but nobody will say anything about it. So he sleeps with her, and she goes back home. You know, it was supposed to be a one thing, and that would have been it maybe. And afterwards, she sends a message to David to say she's pregnant. Because the time she was bathing, she just finished her period, so it was her cleansing time. So she knew that it wasn't her husband. She's pregnant. So David sends to the war, a message to the war to tell Joab to send Uriah to him. So Uriah goes to see David in Jerusalem, and David asks him, you know, how's the war? How's Joab treating you all? How's this and that? And Uriah gives him the news about the battle between the Israelites and the Ammonites. And David says, okay, that's good. Now go home, wash your feet, and, you know, go home. But Uriah stays and sleeps in front of the palace with his men, the men that he went back with. So David is told that Uriah did not go home. So he called Uriah the next morning I thought I told you to go home, to go and be with your wife. And Uriah says, your men, the Lord's men, they are camping in tents and they are sleeping under the sky in the open field, and I should go home and go and sleep on a soft bed in the arms of my wife with perfume all over me. It doesn't seem right at all. That's why he didn't go home. So the king said, okay, that's fine. Stay a couple more days before you go back to the battlefront. He invited him the next day to come for a meal, and he made him drunk, gave him lots of fine wine, made him drunk. So and then said, now go home and rest. Go and be with your wife. Instead, he's too drunk to go home. So he settles with the king's servants in the servants' quarters. He's just legless to go home. Even if he'd gone home, he would have just fallen fast asleep. He was completely useless at that point. So he just slept with the king's servants. He did not go home. David was told Uriah did not go home. He slept with the king's servants in the servants' quarters. So he called him the next day, gave him a note, and told him to give it to Joab when he gets back to the battlefront. And inside the note, he wrote it there that Joab should put Uriah in the fiercest battle, and then everyone should withdraw from him and allow him to be killed. So he takes this letter, trusting the king. He did not read it, nothing. He takes it to the war front, sees Joab, says this is a message from the king. Joab reads the message. Only God knows what's going through Joab's head at this moment. That doesn't this man know that he's just carried his own death penalty, his own death is his own death. Doesn't he know? So he has to obey the king. That's Joab, and then he takes Uriah to the forefront where the battle is the fiercest, and orders the men to withdraw from him. So Uriah is killed. So when Uriah is killed, obviously there will be other casualties as well, not just Uriah, because then that would really seem weird, that how come he was the only one. There will be other innocent people that died just because the king wanted to kill Uriah. So those men who died also, their wives, their children, widows, fatherless, just because he wanted to kill one man. So Joab sends a servant to David to tell him how the battle is going and what happened. They've lost some men in the battle, and Joab told the man that if the king is cross, saying, why did you go so close to the wall? Don't you know during a war you don't go too close to a wall, because they're going to shoot arrows from on top of the wall. Even a woman killed somebody with a heavy millstone, threw it on him from on top of the wall. Didn't you learn your lesson? You're not supposed to go too close to a wall when fighting a battle. So Joab said, if the king says all of this and he's angry that why did they go so close there to lose some men, then the man should say, and Uriah, your servant, the Hittite, is dead. So the man went and said all these things to David. And when David heard that Uriah also died, he said, okay, that's war. You lose some, you win some. Some people will die. Some people will be alive. That's fine. You can go back and say all these words to encourage Joab that it's fine. So when Bathsheba heard that her husband was killed in the battle, she mourns for him. We don't know. It could be a really genuine remorse, genuine grief that she feels for her husband. She might really love him, but because this is the king, she couldn't say no. It was against her powers. We don't really know, because sometimes Bathsheba is vilified as a woman, a dark woman or thingy woman. I'm playing devil's advocate. She may be completely innocent. She may have loved her husband with her whole heart. She doesn't know how to refuse the king. He's the king. He's very powerful. What's going to happen to her? What's going to happen to her husband? What's going to happen to her family? And it seems like her grandfather was Ahithophel. Ahithophel was the one who he left David's side and joined forces with Absalom against David. That's her granddad. So she must have been thinking about all these. Her family are really connected to David. what will happen? So maybe that's why she gave in. She had no choice. I don't know. So she mourned for her husband Uriah. When her time of mourning was over, David sent for her and took her as wife, and in due course she gave birth to a son. So God was displeased. God saw. They did it in secret, but God saw. So God sent prophet Nathan to David. Nathan went to David and told David a story about two men who lived in a certain city. One very poor, one wealthy. The wealthy man had loads of cattle, sheep, animals, donkeys, everything. The poor man had just one lamb, and that lamb, he'd raised it as a baby. He treats that lamb as a daughter. The lamb eats with him and his children. He sleeps on his bed. He goes everywhere with the poor man. And then Nathan continued the story and said, then one day, the rich man had a visitor. He came from a far place. And instead of the rich man to kill one of his own animals to entertain his guest, he took the only lamb of that poor man and slaughtered it and cooked it for his visitor. And when David heard this story, he was incensed. He was furious. He was like going crazy. What? That rich man, he is wicked. How dare he do that? The only lamb of that poor man, he has to pay back fourfold, and he has to be killed. What he did was unacceptable. And then Nathan said, that rich man is you. God gave you victory over Saul. He made you king over Israel, over Judah. He gave you the wealth, the houses, the lands of Saul as your own. Whatever you ask God, he will give it to you. If it's not enough, God will give you whatever you want. If it's more wives you want, God will give it to you. But what did you do? You took another man's wife. You killed the husband. It was you who used the sword of the Ammonites to kill Uriah. And now you took his wife. When David heard this, he was remorseful. He said, against thee only have I sinned. Have mercy on me, O Lord, according to thy loving kindness. He prayed, he wept, he was really sad. And Nathan said, because of what you have done, that child will die. You know, that child will not stay alive. And the sword will not depart from your house. If somebody inside your house will sleep with all your wives openly before Israel, you did yours secretly. But the person within your own household will sleep with your wives openly, and the sword will not depart from your house. And as we know, if you know the story of David, his son Absalom slept with all his concubines. When he drove David from the throne, he slept with his concubines openly on top of the roof in front of the whole of Israel. They all witnessed it. That was that prophecy that came to pass. So David cried. He was praying to God, pleading for the life of the boy. That is not his fault, Lord, you know, like take me instead. But he was fasting, he did not eat, praying constantly, just on his floor, rolling before the Lord, asking for mercy for that baby. But after the 7th day, the baby died, because God has struck the baby with sickness, and the baby died. So the servants were fearful to tell David that the baby had died. But when he saw them whispering and tiptoeing, he asked them, is the child dead? And they said yes. And he got up, he washed his face, and he ate. And the servants said, we don't understand this. You've been mourning and weeping and crying and fasting, and now you heard the baby is dead. You got up to eat. And David said, yes, I thought maybe if I prayed, God will forgive me and spare the child. But since God refused and the baby is now dead, there's no more need for me to fast, because I cannot bring the baby back. Instead, I will go to the child. So he got up, he ate, he comforted his wife Bathsheba, and in due course, God remembered her. She got pregnant. She had another child, Solomon, and God loved Solomon. I mean, can you just see? Can you just see how God operates? It's just, it blows your mind. These are two people who got together under that circumstance. An innocent man died, but God loved Solomon, the seed from these two people. So if you are looking at somebody and you are writing them off, I'm sorry for you. God has not written them off. God has not written off anybody. So if you are looking at maybe me and you're saying, Tina, she's a child of the devil. Tina, she's not born again. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised that God is looking at Tina and saying, that's my daughter, in whom I am well pleased. Don't write anybody off. You have no idea. You have no clue. So, and as we know the full story, Solomon, he succeeded his dad David and became king of Israel. And under Solomon's rule, there was peace in Israel. God gave him wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. He became the wisest man in the world. You know, even the Queen of Sheba went to test his knowledge. And afterwards she said, in fact, what I was told is nothing compared to what I have seen. The Bible says Solomon was well versed in plants, in animals, in astrology. He knew everything. God gave him that wisdom. So we're not going to go into Solomon because this teaching series is about the women of the Bible, and this is about Bathsheba. So Bathsheba, God selected her child to be king. He had mercy, you know, on David, that his reign will not be totally taken away. There will still be somebody on the throne. And even when Solomon's son Rehoboam messed up, there was still someone on the throne because of the covenant God had made with David. So this is the story of Bathsheba. There's not much said about her. Some people paint her as a scarlet woman. I don't know why she's being blamed. I've heard a woman like me, like Bathsheba, a woman, say, why was she bathing there? Why was she bathing there? Excuse me? She's in her house. She can bath wherever she was. Why was David looking at her? When David saw, why didn't he quickly close his eyes and say, the Lord is my shepherd, and walk away from there? Why did he keep on looking, and then go and inquire about her, and then take her, and then kill her husband? So anyway, that's Bathsheba, David's wife. So thank you so much. We'll move on to another woman in the next book. God bless you. Bye.